A few weeks ago, I noticed someone approaching my house on the new doorbell camera, but I never saw them leave. The next day, the footage was gone. So, I started playing detective and turning my focus on my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXW. It didn't take long for me to realize that something was off. She probably thought I'd found something, likely linked to the doorbell camera she deleted. At the time, I was setting up more in-home cameras and video surveillance. Eventually, she confessed to an affair that had been going on for about a year, most of it while I was helping take care of my elderly parent. She admitted that I deserved better and suggested a fair divorce, selling the house and splitting the proceeds. She even offered to pay alimony for a while. We share most of the debt, and the house sale should cover it, leaving us both with a little bit to start fresh. Honestly, it feels disheartening and unfair. I won't lie, I was angry, and revenge crossed my mind. But then, I realized there wasn't really anyone to expose her to. The two people who might care are both on her side, and the other guy. He's single, divorced, and, surprisingly, more aware of my marriage than I was. Their relationship isn't even that close, and it's probably not the first time she's done something like this. Despite my urge for revenge, I chose to let it go and avoid any more pain. This whole mess came at a time when I'm already dealing with elder care issues, and honestly, I don't have the energy or the will to fight. She did offer to try to fix things, but we both know there's just too much damage. And I'm still carrying the weight of being cheated on over 25 years ago. Some scars don't ever really heal. I've started to question whether my entire relationship was a rebound. I'm a committed person, though, and when I give my all, I really give it. Maybe I jumped in too soon. Now, I can't imagine trusting anyone again. There's no confrontation or exposure, just two lives broken apart. Now, I need to rebuild myself without my pride, without my ego. It feels like yet another failure in a long list of them. My life as I knew it is over, and I'm just going through the motions, dealing with the fallout. I don't want to go home, but I have to pack up and get the house ready for sale. Then I'll have to figure out where to live, though I have no idea where that might be. It all just feels miserable. I spent more than half my life with her, and now I feel like I've wasted it. At least we didn't have kids, so after the divorce we won't need to stay in touch. That's one small blessing. But even that will take time. Every time I hear her voice, it brings the pain back. My version of pain shopping is scrolling through old pictures of us, remembering the good times. I can't understand why I'm so stuck in the past, mourning something I thought I was ready to move on from. I lie awake at night, thinking of all the mistakes I made, questioning if I was ever really good enough for anyone, and wondering why I deserve to be treated this way. I reflect on how much my life sucks, and why I always seem to end up on the losing side. Now I'm older, broken, and feel like I don't deserve this life. No hopes, no dreams, just me, alone with my thoughts. A few more thoughts from last night. She hasn't called or texted me since I left. I did tell her not to, and I meant it. She probably knew I meant it, but still, not a single sorry. Not even a "are you okay?" Is she just sitting at home watching TV? Like it's any other Tuesday? Or maybe not. During the Christmas before last, we talked about how our relationship turned into a dead bedroom. I mentioned that 10 to 15 years ago we had several miscarriages due to IVF, and that experience made me terrified of getting her pregnant and losing the baby. It pushed both of us into therapy, and we barely made it out of a deep depression with some help and a lot of luck. But now, everything's gotten worse since she confessed to the affair. I said something really hurtful to her about how she deserves to lose our kids. I'm thinking about sending an apology text for that. Could my sharing my fears over a year ago have pushed her to cheat on me? I only talked about that with my therapist at the time, and we agreed it wasn't the right moment to bring it up with her. Maybe she blames me for the dead bedroom years. Maybe it's all my fault. Oh God, what did I do? After some serious thinking, and against my better judgment, I called her. I knew she probably wouldn't pick up, so I left a voicemail, apologizing for what I said. I told her it was hurtful and completely untrue. I acknowledged that it's over between us and suggested we handle things like adults in our 50s, not like the young, naive people we were when we first met. I told her I hoped she finds what she's looking for and left it at that. My wife called me later that night, She appreciated my apology and understood that I said those things to hurt her. We didn't talk about much, aside from her apologizing again, which didn't really change anything. I told her I'd be coming back home this weekend, and I needed her to not be there. It was mostly civil, but I made it clear that I don't care where she goes. I suggested she stay with her boyfriend, since that's who she wanted all along. She denied it, saying she wanted me back and that we could work things out. She asked for one last chance, promising to do anything to make it up. I'll admit I wanted nothing more than to go back in time, any time but the last year. I'd even go back to the worst parts of our lives if it meant not being here. But I stood firm, telling her there's no way we can be together now. It's been a year, and I can't imagine feeling the same way about her anymore. I asked her just one question. She stayed silent for what felt like forever, but I didn't say a word. Eventually, she asked if I really wanted to know. Not wanting to make things worse, I told her I needed to know. That's when the truth hit me even harder. She told me that it started with only a few encounters early on, but within a month it was almost every day while I was away, and sometimes even on weekends when she claimed she was at the gym. For about 6 months, it was about once or twice a week whenever I was gone. It made me feel sick to my stomach. I muted the call to let some of that pain out. She had been with him more times in the past year than we had been together in the last 10 to 15 years, hundreds, maybe even more than the beginning of our relationship. I wanted to ask more questions, but the hurt and shame overwhelmed me. Part of me wanted to know if he was better, if he was bigger, and what exactly they did together, but I couldn't take any more. I just told her that she should go be with him this weekend, so I could be alone at the house and gather more of my things. I didn't even know where I'd take them yet. I haven't slept, grabbed a bottle of good scotch, and now I have to work and take care of my parent while nursing a hangover. As I expected, things were agreed upon. I'm back at the house now, collecting some things I forgot to pack last weekend. Thankfully, she's nowhere to be seen. I'm grabbing documents, clothes, and other essentials, and it's going faster than I thought. I'm pushing through, determined to keep going before I get too bogged down by it all. Down in the basement, packing up a few more things is tough, but I want to keep moving. I faintly hear water running in the pipes. It goes on for a while before I realize what's happening. I walk upstairs, and the sound of the shower stops me cold. I'm stunned. I make myself a cup of coffee and decide it's better to step outside to my car. I sit in the driveway for a while, considering driving away, but I just stay there, unable to move. I start typing a nasty text, but then I stop myself and decide to wait for her to leave again. My new neighbor comes over and introduces himself as I stand outside having a smoke. I don't share any details with him, just keep things polite as we say our goodbyes. The garage door opens, and I see her behind her car, asking if we can talk. I stand there, still in shock, as my neighbor introduces us. We head inside, and I'm still dumbfounded. I ask her why she's here. She explains she can't check into her place until later today and that she was at the gym. She thought I wouldn't mind her taking a shower and grabbing more of her things. She assumed it would be fine since she didn't see me around initially. I stand there trying to process who this person is. After a brief, awkward apology from her and a suggestion that we get more counseling, I look her in the eye and say no. I tell her to leave. I've got things to do, and she had agreed to stay away. I tell her that this is the mess she's caused, and head back to the basement. Now I'm sitting here, typing this out, trying to keep my blood pressure in check. I just heard the garage door open and close, so thankfully, she's gone. I'm a bit of a mess, wanting to get back to packing, but my bourbon collection is staring at me. I've already had one good drink earlier. I know if I have another right now, today will be even more of a disaster. So here I go. Sunday arrives after another sleepless night, filled with packing and emotional turmoil. Everything was hard. The memories, the pictures, the items we had picked out together, like our wedding album, just stirring up more feelings. I tried my best to control them, but despite how tough it was, I kept going, focusing on the things that mattered most to me. Unfortunately, one item brought me the most pain: the sealed urn with our children's ashes. We had planned to have our ashes combined and scattered in the ocean near our favorite beach once we passed. Well, that plan is gone now. Here's the dilemma. I'm not sure if it's wrong for me to want to keep the urn. I know I'll have to discuss it with her eventually, but I have no idea how that conversation will go. I don't know if it's possible to open it up and split the ashes. Feels wrong, like neither of us would really be keeping them. I'll ask my attorney about it when I hire one. I guess I didn't mention it to her because at that point, I had zero trust in her. Fast forward to Sunday evening. I'm nearly packed with the things I'm taking for now. I wanted to have enough so that if I couldn't come back for a while, at least I'd have some important things, keepsakes, documents, etc. I knew she was supposed to come back after 9 o'clock, as we had agreed, and I didn't really want to be there. I resisted the urge to take apart the electronics or reset the router out of spite. For once, I tried to be the bigger person, especially after a few calls and messages from a supportive friend. It's about 7 o'clock when I'm loading the last of my things into the car. No surprise, she shows up. She comes in looking a little shaken, but nothing compared to how I felt. She starts by saying it looked like I was getting ready to leave again, and if I had to go so early, could we at least talk? I'm already frustrated that she's even here, but I want to be stronger than I feel. I tell her I don't want to stay too late because I have to get back in time to relieve the person helping with my parent. I only have a few minutes, but if there's something important, she can tell me, and I can call her later while driving. She said she understood, but she really needed me to hear what she had to say about this past weekend. She wished we could talk without me being angry. She told me she spent the weekend alone. Not that I fully believed her, but given everything that had happened, and everything she'd done to us, I knew she understood I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. But she loves me, and she'll always be in love with me forever. She knows I don't believe that now, but she was angry at herself for hurting me so much and destroying the one man who had loved her unconditionally and always been there for her. I did my best not to shout, cry, or even hug her. I just gave her that blank, indifferent stare. I'll admit it, I failed. My eyes watered up, but I fought to keep the tears back. Yeah, I failed at that too, but I didn't say anything. I figured I'd just let her say whatever she needed to say and leave afterward. I just listened to her talk, explaining herself and justifying what she did. Why she did it for so long, why she didn't stop, and why, even when she thought I knew, she assumed I either didn't care or wouldn't do anything about it. She said she thought I must have been cheating for all those years. How I seemed distant, how we'd become more like roommates than a married couple, and how, even though she knew I was the only man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, she had wanted to come to me, confess, and get it over with. But she said she knew I would never accept it or take her back if she told me the truth. At every point, she took full responsibility for everything and said it was entirely her fault. She even mentioned seeking counseling to understand why she engaged in this behavior for such a long time. She claimed our life together had fallen apart because, even though she had everything she wanted, she thought we could live the rest of our lives without emotional closeness. A decision she said she had come to accept. She said I could be with other people if I wanted to, which seemed like typical behavior from someone who had cheated, just as I suspected. Then, she shared something that hit me hard. 2 Christmases ago, she had gotten upset when she found out I was afraid of being too close to her because I feared getting her pregnant again. She argued that my concerns were just excuses, saying I didn't really want her or a family, especially since I resisted adopting. She admitted that it upset her every day, feeling like the one thing missing in our lives was intimacy and family, which she believed I had been withholding from her. She expressed anger, saying I had blamed her for the loss of our children, lying every time I claimed otherwise. She felt like I'd been disgusted by her for losing them, and that resentment lingered even after all these years. She claimed she had loved me enough for both of us. When my parents' health worsened, she thought I was just using it as an excuse to distance myself from her. Suddenly, everything made sense in her mind, and she believed all her fears were justified. She just wanted to be loved, and she felt I hadn't been honest about my feelings all along. She told me the man she called the gym guy wasn't even a real possibility until all these realizations hit her. She said at first, she hadn't even considered being unfaithful, but after a while it became an act of spite. Then, she realized how much she missed intimacy, though she kept telling him it was just about that. She insisted she never intended to leave me and that she didn't talk about me with him, though I'm not so sure now. Eventually, she admitted that she had developed feelings for him. telling him she hadn't felt this way in years, but she insisted it wasn't the same as what we had. She reached the conclusion that it was over with him and hoped I could forgive her. She wanted us to talk again to figure out how to move forward, even if we decided to split, asking for some time before we considered divorce. She argued that I had been dishonest for years and that I should give her the chance she believed she deserved. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped. "You deserve a chance after a year of cheating?" I reminded her that when I first opened up about my fears, I worked through them in therapy and had never mentioned them again to avoid exactly this situation. I told her that despite my attempts in recent years to be more engaged, more romantic, and more connected, her response had been minimal. I told her that opening up my deepest secret was supposed to bring us closer, but instead, she used it against me to cheat and tear my life apart. I admitted I felt so shattered that I considered ending things every day, and she said she had thought the same thing. She said she couldn't do that to me. In frustration, I shouted, "But you can do this to me for a year?" After I calmed down, I told her that I could never be open and vulnerable to her, or to anyone again, knowing how she'd weaponized my fears, weaknesses, and honesty against me. It had changed me forever. Although I feared this was the point of no return, after reflecting on everything last week, how it all happened, and when, according to her, I still wasn't sure I believed her claim that she hadn't done this before. I was already about 45 minutes behind my planned departure time. I knew I had to speed up on the highway, but my mind was a mess, and I wasn't in the right headspace. After leaving, I told her I would think about what she said, and if I had more to discuss, I'd call her while on the road. However, during the drive, I found myself blasting loud music and crying from the intense pain, realizing the truth behind my thoughts had been confirmed. It was an even harder ride than the first one after D-Day. In the end, I didn't call her. Now, with the sobering clarity of the next day, I find myself questioning not only how I caused this, but if there's even a chance she's seen my posts and is using them against me. To be honest, she's not active on social media, and I doubt she uses Reddit at all. It was never on her phone, tablet, or in her app store history. I also reflect on how foolish I was to let my guard down with anyone, thinking there are things you just shouldn't share. If I had kept everything to myself, I wouldn't be in this situation. I feel like this is karma, especially since I was already on the verge of leaving last fall. I'm just going through the motions now, and this incident proves I should stick to the act of being a happy guy and never let my guard down again. Feels like I ruined everything. I'm still working with my attorney and trying to stay on track, but I don't know how I could ever go back to her after this. The truth is, she's reopened the wounds in my heart and ripped away everything I was clinging to just to keep going. I emailed her through her work account, letting her know I had hired someone to represent me legally and asked who I should contact for further matters. I also advised her to seek counsel for the consequences of her actions. She responded, wanting to talk more and apologizing, saying she couldn't imagine how I must feel. She admitted she didn't deserve the chance to speak with me before I made any decisions, but suggested that time might help calm things down. She acknowledged that my opinion of her was probably better than she deserved and proposed discussing counseling and personal matters outside of work email, either through text or a call. I replied that I'd be busy with work and P's move, but would use her personal email for further communication. She thanked me and urged me to consider her words. She expressed concern for my well-being, recognizing the loneliness I might be feeling, and asked how P was doing with the move. She sent her love to P and apologized again, urging me to call soon. I then remembered that P, my parent, is losing everything, the home of over 50 years and all the memories, as they're moving into a facility. I started thinking about how a person with dementia must feel being moved, especially since they have to be reminded over and over because they forget. It must be overwhelming to relive those emotions daily. I've been trying to be as gentle as possible, but we're sorting through things to see what they actually want. After thinking about the exchange, the mention of not sending Ish to work stuck with me. At first, I thought it made sense. Personal matters shouldn't mix with work, but I'm pretty sure she must have been using her work phone for this. Her personal one is always clean, and I even updated it for her new watch last Christmas. I guess I could have missed something, though. Update. I found a better place to stay temporarily with a friend who lives near work, so I've moved in for now. While I considered renting an apartment right away, this arrangement works well for the short term. As for the next steps, I served her with divorce papers, but she responded aggressively through her attorney. Recently, I had to deal with a maintenance issue at my old home. It wasn't too damaging, but it required quick attention. When I went to handle it, I thought she wasn't around. I met with the contractor, fixed the problem, and made sure I'd leave before she got home. It took hours, but I managed to get everything sorted. Of course, things couldn't go smoothly. Later that day, I got a call from a doctor saying she had been admitted to the hospital. I'm still listed as her emergency contact, so it wasn't a total surprise. Before I arrived, she had called an ambulance, believing she was having a heart attack. It turned out to be a panic attack, but she told them she had ongoing self-harm thoughts and was admitted for observation. She's been there since, so I had to inform her boss about her medical leave. After speaking with the doctor, I decided to visit her. The doctor said I could come, but I needed to be non-confrontational since she was in a delicate state. I was torn about it. Part of me thought it could just be a manipulative excuse, but another part of me, the part that still cares about her, didn't want her to hurt herself or struggle in the future. In the past, I had been fully present when she was in care for mental health issues and other chronic health problems. I did everything I could to help her. Selfishly, though, I didn't want this situation to affect her ability to handle our shared affairs. I spoke with my friend, who said it's up to me whether or not I visit. I also consulted with my attorney. After the initial visits, they advised me to be cautious. Don't make any promises or say anything that could be used against me later. I knew, from what I had learned about cheaters, that the threat of self-harm can sometimes be a manipulation tactic. But given her history, I also recognized this could be a genuine crisis. I get it. I shouldn't let anything tied to her actions hold me back from moving forward with my life. But there's still a part of me that feels I should be there for her. It's frustrating, wishing none of this had happened, but knowing that it did. I feel like I've been firm with her, but seeing her in such a state might undo all my progress. Before anyone criticizes me, let me explain. I can't just abandon her. It's not in my nature. She really doesn't have anyone else. Her only real friend lives far away and is struggling with her own serious health issues. So, I informed her doctor that I would visit her in the hospital and did so the following day. When I arrived, she was a mess. I brought some things I thought she might need, assuming she'd be in the hospital for a few days. She was still sleeping when I got there, hooked up to N4 and various monitors. None of them seemed related to mental health, so I figured it was something like dehydration. But as I sat there, all I could think about was how I had seen her sleep so many times, looking peaceful and beautiful, the person I once wanted. As I watched her, she began to wake up, and all the anger and betrayal I had been feeling returned. But I held it together. When she finally woke up and saw me, she begged for a hug and forgiveness. I told her I was just there to make sure she was okay, expressing my worry for her. I made it clear that I wasn't there to talk about us. We kept it civil, but there were plenty of tears on her side. We talked for a long time, and then she dropped another bombshell. During her gynecologist visit for STD tests and a checkup, they found something that was still being assessed. I thought, oh boy, here we go. Maybe she caught an STD and I was about to hear about it. Or if I was lucky, maybe it wasn't that. It turned out she was diagnosed with fairly aggressive ovarian cancer. Now, I'm no expert, but I know that type of cancer is often a dire diagnosis. I had to step out of the room for a moment to gather myself. I didn't want her to see the emotions I was feeling. After taking a minute to compose myself, I went back in, and we continued talking for hours. Eventually, I agreed to help her however I could. Part of me wanted to tell her to turn to her boyfriend now. I made it clear that it had nothing to do with us getting back together. I believed she would do the same for me if the situation were reversed. But who knows? Her panic attack, it turns out, was triggered by this news and her birthday, which I had completely ignored, combined with getting served with divorce papers in the same week. It felt like the perfect storm, maybe too much karma. She had been feeling like ending her life would be easier than facing me, the disease and everything else, losing everything and now potentially losing her life on top of it. She also didn't want me to be burdened by her medical debt or her life insurance and wanted to give me the house free and clear. That would make for a nice nest egg. But I convinced her that what I really wanted from her was to stay alive and fight this with everything she had. I told her I would never want her to end her life because of me or her situation. So, this is where I am now. Crisscrossing highways for work, visiting my parent, the hospital, my friend's place, and now back to my old home to collect her belongings. She's been moved to a regular room now, since the doctors believe she's no longer a danger to herself. More tests have been done, and today I'm waiting for the results to determine the stage of her condition. The preliminary exams suggest at least stage 2B or higher. If it's not stage 4, there's a chance we can manage, but if it is, we're looking at a tough, shortened outcome. I'm writing this in the hospital cafeteria, waiting for the oncology team to provide more results and details. I've always been the kind of person who will do anything for anyone. If her actions hadn't pushed me away, I would be a wreck. Not that I haven't been privately. Once again, I'm being the strong one for both of us, trying to stay optimistic, which is a huge stretch for me, since I'm naturally more pessimistic. The biggest development here is that if there's hope, it involves major emergency surgery and chemotherapy, followed by a period of recovery. I've committed to being there for her through the surgery, chemo, and recovery, assuming the best-case scenario. I haven't said I'd move in with her, though it might become necessary. My stance on divorce hasn't changed. I've consulted with my lawyer about the legal implications of this, and whether we can still be considered separated. They said we can consider it an in-house separation, under certain conditions. My other concern is avoiding responsibility for her medical debt, which could delay the divorce proceedings. They've suggested amending our settlement agreement, but she would need to agree that none of the medical debt is my responsibility. So, is there a chance I can care for her through this, avoid reconnecting emotionally, and still move on with my life, regardless of how this all plays out? Update for those still following. I finally met with the doctors. It's stage 2B, and the cancer has spread, but the tumors are still small and haven't reached distant organs like the bladder or liver, which from my understanding, is nearly impossible to cure. She'll undergo serious surgeries and chemotherapy. I've already made up my mind to support her in her battle, regardless of everything else. I won't abandon her now. Some may say it's not my responsibility anymore, but I can't be that tough person I thought I was. Or maybe I'm just too old to care what others think. I'm doing this for myself. I'll continue with the separation and divorce, but I'll likely move back in for an in-house separation for a while. I've discussed the plan with my attorney, and they understand my position. They said we can still consider the time I'm there as separate, as long as we don't share a bed, which isn't an issue for obvious reasons. We also need an agreement that she won't complicate the process any further, as it seemed that was her initial plan. I'll make it clear that if I'm supporting her, she can't drag out the divorce. However, I'll agree to give her time to settle in and get better situated. I'll admit, I feel guilty, almost like I'm bargaining with her life, but I guess everyone has their limits. She's scheduled for surgery in the next few days to have additional biopsies taken and undergo a major operation. The treatment plan is aggressive, but it's necessary to stop the cancer from spreading further. I don't really need to know more than that. In a way, as my post title suggests, her cheating might have saved her life. She likely would have discovered this cancer too late otherwise. So, in this messed up situation, someone might be getting a small win. Update. I've been at the hospital with my wife since yesterday morning, and it's been just as awful as everything else. She's in critical condition. During surgery, they had to stop because her blood pressure became uncontrollable. The surgeon was able to remove a significant portion of the cancer, but not all of it. Additional surgery is too risky for now. Last night, she had a seizure, which caused more damage and bleeding, leading to another surgery. Despite being advised not to stop the internal bleeding earlier, she pulled through that surgery early this morning but has been in and out of consciousness ever since. They're doing everything they can to prevent a stroke. I'm not sure if she'll make it, but I haven't slept in 2 days, constantly imagining the worst. She's a bit more stable now, but it's still a delicate situation. While I was waiting for her first surgery, I used her work phone and saw a message from her affair partner, dating back a few weeks from an unrecognized number. Even though she had blocked his other number, she kept this conversation. He was apologizing for how he treated her during their last meeting. There's a whole backstory I won't go into, but I tracked him down once, almost doing something foolish and dangerous. He reached out to her, and she agreed to meet him to avoid legal trouble. This happened almost a month ago. Anyway, I saw her response. She said he was the biggest mistake of her life, that she hated herself for meeting him, and that she would never contact him again. She asked him not to get in touch anymore. I don't take this as anything significant, since I found it rather than her admitting it to me. So, I guess she still has her secrets, even though I went through everything, her work emails, personal accounts, you name it. I looked back through the past year, and I found nothing suspicious before then. Again, it doesn't change my decision about the divorce or my willingness to help her. I'm just venting here, since everything's such a mess right now. Whether she survives or not, she may never know I know this, and it just proves to me that she's still capable of lying to me. I don't even know if we'll ever get the chance to talk about it. At this point, it really doesn't matter. So, this might be the last of my posts because nothing else matters if she doesn't survive, if she has brain damage, or if her situation is worse than expected. I'll still do what I can for her and hope for the best, but I'm naturally bracing for the worst. The only thing I can hope for right now is to get some sleep before the weekend's update. Latest update on my situation. My wife's condition has been fluctuating, mostly getting worse. The medical team suspects she's had a small stroke, but she's holding on and showing slight improvement over the weekend. While she's not out of danger yet, the doctors are a bit more hopeful. She's been more conscious, although she's in a lot of pain and on heavy medication. They've moved her out of intensive care, and she'll likely go into rehab before coming home on Thursday. My wife's best friend, MEM, reached out to me. We hadn't spoken since this all started, and I assumed she knew what was going on and had been supporting my wife. I left her a voicemail the night after my wife's first surgery, just in case they hadn't talked, letting her know about the critical situation. I suggested that if she wanted to see my wife, she should do so soon, in case the worst happened. Although MEM and I weren't especially close, she and my wife had been friends since their teens and went to college together. We spent holidays and a couple of vacations together. MEM called on Thursday, offering sympathy for what we were going through and asking if she could visit my wife. She also asked if she could stay at the house, possibly thinking I still lived there. I agreed, though staying in my own house part-time still causes me pain. MEM is a genuinely good person, and I knew that losing her best friend was weighing on her. I picked MEM up from the airport Thursday evening, and we went straight to the hospital. During the drive, we talked about my wife's condition and everything that had happened since the surgery. Eventually, MEM revealed that she knew about our situation. She said my wife had confided in her only a few days before being hospitalized, when she first received the cancer diagnosis and the divorce papers. They hadn't talked much last year, not like before, and MEM had assumed it was because my wife was struggling with the news of her own medical issues, and also with the thought of possibly losing her best friend. The kicker was when MEM shared her suspicions about her husband cheating with my wife. They had been working through it, but MEM believed it was mostly emotional thinking. He had a crush on someone at work but hadn't acted on it. She had given my wife advice on handling the situation: marriage counseling, setting boundaries, and demanding respect. MEM also shared that they had argued a lot when she told my wife she wasn't sure they could still be friends, after learning how deceitful my wife had been to both her and me. MEM had even cursed my wife out, saying she deserved whatever consequences came with the divorce. This was surprising to me because MEM isn't the type to use bad language. She's pretty religious and straight-laced. MEM mentioned that my wife had called her a few times afterward, but MEM had ignored the calls, thinking I was trying to involve her more in the situation. But when she heard my voicemail, she realized she couldn't avoid seeing my wife if the worst happened. She didn't want their last words to be on bad terms. So, she called me to come visit. We spent a lot of time together this weekend. Not in any inappropriate way, but MEM shared more insights after visiting. We talked almost every night until very late, and it was nice because she never pressured me about staying with my wife. After each visit, she seemed more understanding. On her last night, She surprised me by revealing that my wife had asked her to discuss do not resuscitate, DNR, orders and other end-of-life matters with me. MEM wasn't sure if, in the worst-case scenario, I could make the decision to take my wife off life support if her condition worsened. She also mentioned that my wife had expressed a desire to end her life to avoid further suffering or living with severe disabilities. My wife had asked MEM to convince me to let her go if the time came and I reached out or couldn't cope with the outcome. I'm unsure about the legalities of this situation, other than that it would likely involve being considered brain dead. I plan to talk to my wife about this tonight, but I'm unsure of what to say. Personally, I don't believe in keeping someone alive if they're suffering, and in the right circumstances, I would want to do what's best. But I can't commit to anything beyond that right now, and I worry that my own feelings of wanting this ordeal to be over might influence me. Even in the right medical scenario, I think I would carry a lot of guilt forever. I'll also discuss this with my therapist, although my appointment isn't until later in the week. I asked MEM if she would consider assuming medical power of attorney, POA, for my wife before she left, and she's thinking about it. I'll also ask one of my close relatives, though they live far away and I can't guarantee their involvement. I'm firm on making only legal decisions here. I briefly talked to my lawyer, and we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. But tonight, I'll tell my wife that I understand her wishes, but I can't agree to them right now.